Tuesday meeting of the BOCC. If you want to join me, we'll start with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll ask Commissioner Mortensen to review the minutes for us.
Good morning, everyone. As usual, I reviewed the minutes of the activities last week and I move to approve those minutes.
Any questions, comments, corrections? I don't see any hands. We'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Also vote aye. Thank you. Rundown consent agenda today. We have a consent agenda. We have motion item. I do have a public hearing at 9:30 that I will try to be on time with. On the consent agenda, the first five, you see, we're still working on some easements for the Cloverdale road realignment project. Number 6, we're extending a consultant agreement with Foundation Engineering to expire December 31st, 2024 instead of 2023. What I understand on this, they did engineering for us. We plan on doing construction next year, and we extend that so if things come up during construction, we have the ability to use them. It doesn't add, we're not adding to the cost of the contract. We're just extending the date. 7 and 8 are kind of related. We're in 2024, we'll be working on a little adjusted schedule, commissioner schedule. Mondays will be adjusted. I think we'll start at 9 on Mondays and we'll have 3 sessions. And Tuesdays, not a whole lot of difference. The idea is we won't have people in on every week, but when they do come in, we want to have some metrics and some idea of what's being worked on and what we have. So it'll be more in-depth type meetings, I think, is what we have visioned. 8, we would to do that because we're changing some of the schedule, it changes to the commissioner's rules of practice. So that's why I say 7 and 8 are related. Nine, I think we talked about it last week where we approved with the flooding. We signed a resolution 23-083 to declare a disaster regarding flooding and extensive damage. We do this because we want to be able to give away sandbags and different things, and we can't do that unless we declare it. Letters and notices. A letter to Valerie Ringgold, U.S. Army Planning Branch Chief, regarding the shoreline management carbon sequestration wetland mitigation pilot project for LT1 and the Lower Toutle confluence. That's a long thing to get into, but just if you want some information on that, we can get it to you. But that's basically we have some out by the gun range. We have an area of land that we have, and we have some erosion issues going into the Toutle, and we're trying to do some mitigation work on not only the erosion, but the property itself. Retirement letter dated December 12, 2023 and I'm going to butcher this, Tom Ledoucier, congratulating him on retirement after 18 years of service in the prosecuting attorney's office. Letter to the county boundary review regarding file number 216, single property annexation parcel, 3312 Virginia Way. And D is pretty much the same, a letter boundary review board regarding the annexation. Piece of property in Longview wanted to be annexed into the city. That's what those 2 letters are on. Vouchers in the amount of $935,995.19. With that, any questions on the consent agenda?
On item number 7, does the clerk of the board have a slide to show? I think that was a no. Perhaps our next meeting, we could show a slide.
I do have the sample agenda that we could look at.
Again,
A
please.
a sample of what it's going to look like, agenda
Okay.
for
Did you want to
Mondays.
show that?
Sure.
Or with the chairman's
Yeah.
approval?
Sure. I will add, this wasn't done in a vacuum. Kelly worked with all the departments and actually had buy-in from, to my knowledge, everyone thought it was would be a workable and a good thing. So we talk about efficiency. We need to try it ourselves at times too. So you'll see on Monday, 9 o'clock, you'll have department review. This is a chance for them and it won't always be the same people. They'll be on a schedule. It'll be a time for them to be more in depth on some of the things that are going on. 10 a.m. Public meeting, proclamations, call for hearings, consent agenda. That would be what you hear now is departments will come in Monday and they'll tell us about items they have on the agenda in case we have questions on it. Well, that'll be at 10. And then at 11, we have a lot of human resource and executive sessions. So we're trying to push those to a set time because you'll find a lot of times during the meetings that before you'll run into executive session. We have people from departments sitting out here waiting for that to be done. So we're just trying to make it more efficient for them to not have to sit out here and do some of that. Tuesday, no change.
So the Monday, 10 o'clock is our prep for today's meeting on Tuesdays. Right?
Yes.
If I could add, it's at that time when some pretty important stuff does get discussed. So if you can look ahead at what's going to be on Tuesday and you say, gee, I want to know a little more about this, definitely tune in at the 10 a.m. meeting.
Yeah, you have the opportunity on Monday to do that. Go ahead, Ron.
Your declaration of disaster. I drove up Ostrander Road the other day and it looks like the new bridge going in there weathered the storms quite well. Historically, we've always had flooding out in that area. So just a attribute or comment.
Yeah, thank you. Public Works did give us a list of the issues they had dealt with and everything seemed to be back to normal and handled well. So that was good news, obviously.
Going back to this,
Yeah.
the Wednesday meeting, we still have them slightly modified, I guess.
Right.
And evening meetings, do they exist?
They don't exist unless we call one.
Okay. And that would be special topics of interest.
Right.
And in that case, the public is invited always to suggest what they would like to hear in detail.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would just add that the Tuesday 1:30 meetings are just going to be during the month of September and October for budget workshops. So we will no longer have the commissioner conferences on Tuesday
We're
afternoons.
trying to take care of a lot of that on Mondays and
Yes,
Wednesdays.
those would be covered at 9 a.m. on Mondays.
Okay. Okay, any other questions on consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented this morning.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Last chance for questions, comments. See no hands. I'll call for a vote on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also vote aye. Thank you. Public Works.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sean Rowe, Finance Manager for Public Works. Today before you, we have an agreement between the county and JL Stordahl and Sons for dredge spoil removal from Cook's Ferry. It is a minimum of 150,000 cubic yards up to 400,000 cubic yards at a rate of $2.06 per yard.
From our conversation yesterday, we have about 400,000 yards available.
Yes, sir. So within the cell that we bid on is about 400,000 cubic yards. Cook's Ferry in total is about 1.6 million cubic
Oh,
yards in total.
Okay. And our JL Stordahl is saying we're going to at least take 150.
Yes, sir.
That's their minimum commitment.
Yes, and so it's from the minimum commitment of 150 up to the total value of that cell of approximately 400,000.
And the Corps is often trying to find a place to store dredge spoils, so that we could get those dredge spoils back in from a different route.
100%. So that's the idea behind this, is to give the county areas to deposit any dredge spoils from the area and make those available to be used again, and just continue the circle of disposing and getting rid of and refilling again.
And my curiosity always is, how will JL Stordahl use the dredge spoils?
I'm not sure of that. Probably a retail market would be my assumption.
Okay, and it's generally used for mixing with aggregate to make some concrete or something like that?
Yeah, I'm not 100%
Okay.
sure, and I'm sorry.
Oh, we have somebody coming
Ooh.
up to answer that question.
Good morning, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. So this type of material, it can be used to be mixed in concrete as aggregate. It also is frequently used for construction, for fill material. For example, the McCorkle Dam used this type of material when they were building that up. It can be used in levee construction, road basis. So there's lots of uses for it. I know the Port of Woodland sells theirs, and it goes down to the Vancouver area for construction contracts.
Does that material compact itself and become hard over time, like a sandstone, or harder?
No, it doesn't self-compact. They come and they compact it and use it for basis or mix it in with a larger
So they has to be
gravels.
contained if they're going to use it for a fill situation. It's got to be contained, otherwise it.
Well, yes, they'll
Okay.
pack it in good so that it won't just flow. Some of this has some gravels mixed in, some of the earlier stuff that we have. So it's a mix of materials out there.
Do we have other locations besides Cook's Ferry where we store dredge spoils?
Yes, so we have Cook's Ferry, and then we have what's commonly known as LT1, which is on both sides of the river up there, where we have dredge spoils. Those are our two big dredge spoil sites. There are private dredge spoil sites owned by some of the rock companies. So, for example, down here, in the city of Kelso, that island that they pull out of the Owl Creek quarry, that is commonly used for Columbia River dredge spoils. And then there's another one on the Cowlitz.
Between Tenant Way and the Tenant Way landfill. And the railroad tracks, that area is also a dredge spoil site,
Yes.
privately owned. So
Privately owned ones. There's numerous. And Castle Rock owns quite a few that they've removed the materials from. So there are other dredge spoil sites around this community.
So
Okay.
at our workshop, you mentioned that the Corps currently does not have plans to dredge. So it's not like we're clearing a way for it, but that emergency is always there in case something happens and they plan on it. They are doing their annual monitoring to make sure that flood protection is maintained as they are supposed to. But the other thing that you mentioned that I wasn't aware of was that the revenues that are raised by the sale of the dredge spoils have to be used for recreation and park purposes by the county.
Yes. Because of the way the properties were purchased, and the materials are removed, the proceeds go to recreation purposes.
There are, in addition to LT1, I think there's an LT2
Mhm.
that is up on the Tootle. And it was ultimately given to the Cowlitz Conservation District, and they are working on rehabilitation of that site. What I don't know is whether that site is still eligible for future dredge spoils, because
I'm not sure. We'd have to
Yeah,
look on the
we haven't heard.
documentation. Yes.
but that site is supposed to be available for public access, so.
Let me add that while we'd have no current, or the Corps doesn't have current plans to dredge, I believe it's inescapable that dredging will have to take place. So being prepared is a good thing.
Any other questions, comments on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the bid award to J.L. Stordahl and Sons as has been presented.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. See nobody approach, no hands. We'll call for a vote on the motion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Also vote aye. Thank you. Thanks, you guys. Let's see. We have a couple minutes before the 9:30 public hearing. Just a quick update, upcoming events. We have Cowlitz chaplaincy and on the 19th at 1:30. On the 20th, we have developmental disabilities, human health services will be in. And then we're pretty much done for the holidays, it looks like on my calendar. So we'll open up to public comment. Let me remind, at 9:30, I have a public hearing, so I'll try to be cognizant of that. And other than that,
Mr. Chairman, a quick question on the 19th during the afternoon Tuesday session,
yeah, 1:30.
1:30. Thank you.
Hello, folks. Robert Johnson here again. My first question will be, will there be time later this afternoon to discuss more in regards to what I'm bringing forward on the public meeting? Or should I just start? Okay. We've had opportunities over the last 3 days to review all council meetings that we came to. May 2nd was the first one. June 6th was the next one. The second week of June was the next one. Rick, is there an issue with you shaking your head at me?
You need your mic on. She's telling me you need your mic on.
Okay. Can you hear me all right? Did you
Yeah.
get that information, Arnie?
Yeah.
Thank you. I also forwarded you pictures of these RVs close together, like I said. And last time I was in here, or the meeting prior to that, I asked if you got those emails. And I'm gonna ask Arnie, did you get the emails I forwarded to you, like I forwarded to Tracy Jackson in regards to the trailers being close together?
I believe I did. I've gotten any
Thank
number
you,
of
sir.
emails.
Dennis Weber, did you get the emails? Okay, thank you, sir. Now, I brought in 2 weeks ago those pictures that were the true factual pictures, not the deceptive ones of the ones Tracy Jackson brought forward. Okay? That was an outright lie. And period, straight up. There's no way to defend it. I've had others, all these council meetings are going to the state's attorney's office now. And the state's attorney is getting involved with the sheriff's department now. You guys have let us down. And primarily our chairperson has let us down. And he said he went out there specifically and did not see any of those close trailers in any distances close, and then tried to make fun of the distances in the meeting about what I was talking about. Now, I have those pictures again today, and I did provide them 2 weeks ago. Did anybody even look at the pictures that you guys provided, or Tracy Jackson? Did any of the constituents look at those? Because they were absolute deceptive and lie. There was no pictures taken whatsoever between those RVs. Well, I got pictures again today. And then I want to talk about the pavement that was put in there. There was no engineering. There was no storm drain engineering. You guys do your inspections. You said that in the May 1st meeting, the June 6th meeting, the June 12th meeting. Well, no fire extinguishers for 20 years. Well, I just visited another park in Cowlitz County. Same problem. He says he has full confidence in his fire officials. Tracy Jackson says she has full confidence in her people. Well, Tracy Jackson is an outright liar, and she needs to be removed from her position because she's not providing the proper care for the constituents of Cowlitz County. Now I'm going to talk about one more other subject matter because we are going to court. That's the bottom line. That's done. RVs are being dumped out in front of that RV park by the manager. Okay? Illegal or not. I called the sheriff's department, or I went down to the courthouse yesterday. And I asked their clerks, I said, I'd like to get a question answered for me, which I already know the answer. Can you dump RVs and cars on the side of the road? She goes, well, let me check and see if I can get somebody to answer that for you, Mr. Johnson. So I sat out in front, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. She comes out and she goes, well, there's nobody here to help you. I drive out of there, and who do I see? Troy Brightville in the back smiling at me. The one that said the judges are no good and don't know what the hell they're doing in Cowlitz County. Now, you guys somebody needs to step up. And I know we don't have a county administrator because I've looked into that. And I spoke to this young lady, I think your manuscript person, yesterday in regards to some things. But you guys saw those pictures. And you guys, when I asked you the last time, you didn't even respond. You just looked down, all of you. I'm ashamed of all of you. And you've made me look like a bad person and defaming me. Everything I brought to these meetings is true. And everything that Joanna Barnhart brought to these meetings is true. Now, I'm going to speak with Jeremy Austin, but I don't think he has a chance in hell to get anywhere because of the corruption we have surrounding that poor man. And he seemed to be the only one with compassion. Tracy Jackson should no longer be working here. And also, there's an article about removing commissioners from the council. Do you guys know of that article, RCW? And what it says about how file charges, they got 10 days to respond. That's what we need to do with our chairperson. Now, I'm going to tell you straight up, we're going to court. It's because of you guys not taking care of business and the county trying to cover everything up. All these parks have been denied any kind of cover by the county. You guys want to pass more stuff, pass more jobs and electric car stuff. You can't even maintain what you're supposed to maintain. Okay? And then you talk about having to have some people go out of there. If they all get burned up, I guess we don't have to worry about it. I've lived in that park for 10 years. Okay? This is how much corruption we got going on. October 26th, when that incident happened, when I got called an effing faggot. The officer Blanton comes out and he says, I got 5 people saying, Mr. Johnson, you've been a problem ever since you've been here. And hear me clearly. I looked at Officer Blanton. I said, do you know how long I've been here? He said, no. I said, I've been here 10 years. I said, do you know how long your people in there, your friends, been here? He goes, no. I said, 2.5. Enough is enough. The crimes have been committed by many people. And that's all I got to say, gentlemen. But any more scandal, I know that the charges are going to be filed against a council member also. because he went out there and lied and defamed my name and called me a liar. Told me to bring the truth. Well, I have brought the truth. I have brought the truth. People need to pay attention. That's all I got to say. You'll be hearing from the state's attorney.
We got a minute or two. Anybody else? Well, we can take a 5-minute recess before the public hearing. I don't think we can start that early, so we'll take a recess till the public hearing. Okay, we're back from recess and we head into public hearing. We have Office of Financial Management. We have budget amendment. We do these periodically to square the books. And so I'll just let you go.
Okay, Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. And we have a budget amendment in which we have unanticipated expenses and unanticipated revenues as well to offset those changes in the budget. And so we're submitting a budget amendment. There was an attachment for this public hearing. Basically, some of the highlights in our general fund, our coroner's office had some unanticipated expenses that needed to be taken care of. One in particular was repairs to the camera system for $16,500. And then also our sheriff's office had some unanticipated expenses related to taking over the animal control operation, and that's $82,200. And then we have revenues that will offset those expenditures in the general fund. We also have,
Kathy,
yes,
on that animal control, we're not getting a year's animal control services for 82,000.
no, sir.
No.
The operations commenced January 1, 2024. They're estimating approximately $375,000 for an annual operating expense for animal control. These expenses are to get the startup related to purchase of a used vehicle, some equipment and everything so that they can begin operations January 1.
Right. So we have been spending about $375,000 a year contracting with the Humane Society, and that arrangement is ending. So
yeah, that arrangement.
not only are we hiring 2 people to take care of it in the unincorporated areas, the cities have the responsibility within the city limits.
Correct, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Correct. So on general fund, those are the highlights of the general fund. The other items on our budget amendment predominantly have to do with different areas where they have estimated truing up some of their expenses as well as truing up some of their revenues. And there's both increases in revenues, increases in expenses, as well as decreases in expenses and decreases in anticipated revenues. So that's predominantly, that's the highlights of this budget amendment. Happy to take any questions.
The cumulative effect on budget overall is really not nil, pretty
Yes.
much.
Yeah, most of the items
We're not way
have,
above what we said we were going to be, and we're not way below what we
Right.
said we were going to
right,
be.
most of the items have revenues that offset
Yeah.
the expenditures.
So following up on that, from a taxpayer standpoint, did the taxpayer have to, in effect, cough up more money? And if so, how much?
No, every one of these items are offsetting. There's an offset to every one of them, either through revenue or through fund balance. So there's no shortfall in these items for the budget.
Okay, no shortfall. We did dig into ending fund balance a little bit.
Yes.
Do you have a?
On general fund, we did not. We actually contributed to the fund balance because we had some unanticipated revenues.
Okay.
So
So one of the things I've appreciated going through this in greater detail than we typically do is that you are about the third director that we've had in a relatively short period of time. And you've come into the budget process with a new set of eyes. You've noticed some patterns of overestimating expenditures that never accumulate. That tends to bump up the overall budget when either they can't ever hire the folks, or the grants don't come through, or projects are simply delayed and can't be done in the year we expected them to, and you're shoring it up. Hopefully, we'll have a better, a more accurate look at our finances in the next year. So I appreciate the work that you've brought to looking at these items.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, one of the things that we do is we're monitoring and we're preparing reports and looking at revenues and expenditure trends every single month. So that's an addition.
So Mr. Mortensen asked about whether or not the taxpayer will be paying more money. And that, of course, as property owners will tell you that yes, that assessment as property values go up, there's a revenue that individuals will pay. Overall, however, we are levying for exactly the same amount of money next year as we've spent, as we did this year. We didn't take the 1% increase or use what we had banked in the past. So we've done, I think we've made an effort to try to hold a lid on those expenses. But the other tax revenue is the sales tax. And of course, when we have inflation, which is almost always the case, that is one of those tax sources where the revenues do increase as the price of goods increase. The only time, at least in my experience, going back almost 30 years now, sales tax revenue always goes up year after year, even when we have recessions. I can only think of 1 year, and I think it was back in 2014, where the sales tax revenue actually stalled. But other than that, every year it goes up a little bit. So we do have the ability most times to meet cost of living adjustments, the contracts that we negotiate with their employees, because of that built-in growth. The whole taxation system in the state of Washington depends upon economic growth. And when that growth doesn't happen, when it's negative, then there is this ripple effect.
So just a couple of things, but before going into that, be careful. If property values are assessed upward, the county doesn't collect more from you, all other things being equal. Maintenance and operations of schools, that's a different story. When they get a percentage of a larger number is a larger amount of dollars. So that will come out of your pocket. And so my other two items, a lot of this was discussed in detail yesterday.
Yes.
And that goes back to my comment that even in the new year, as we go into this, to the schedule, if the budget is something of extreme is not the right of concern, then it really pays to tune in on that. The other one is I've harped before about the process that has been used in the past for when we contract out. So the line item that Kathy talked about, the $16,500 for the camera repair, you probably all know we're still paying the bonds for the morgue. The morgue is quite new, actually, and we should be horrified that we have to pay $16,500 to repair something that presumably was just constructed. I believe our public works as well as our facility staff is pretty well new. Say like this, we shouldn't see that happen anymore. They're well aware and intend to fix that problem.
Any other questions from us? Seeing none, we'll open public hearing.
Thank you, Commissioners. 3 comments. You mentioned sales tax, and all of us in the real world out here know that inflation over the last 2-3 years has approached 20%. So you ought to have close to 20% more in that sales tax coffer. Secondly, the Humane Society, just a clarification, you said $375,000 for control. I understood from previous ones that sheltering is still part of the Humane Society or of someone else.
Yeah, and that contract is the same, pretty much the same amount that we paid Humane Society, and the last figures I saw, and I don't think it's running through the sheriff department, and he's at some point in time is going to give a report when he gets them all down, but there's money in that contract to pay for the sheltering. And they are working on, I say they, it's not only the sheriff, but cities also working on a temporary holding pen, because on animals that are chipped or the first 72 hours, if we can get them returned, then we don't have to pay the sheltering fee. And so we're trying to work that out, but that contract should cover the sheltering too. That's the goal.
Well, the sheltering isn't. Okay, so the sheltering was done by the Humane Society before also, and so they aren't doing, I thought they were.
No, they will be doing it, but they're charging us the last contractor, don't quote me on this, it's like a little over $300 for them to take an animal that we would pay.
Right. So to us, the taxpayers, sheltering at $375,000 for the year is part of the cost. The other part of the cost, or the control, we're also paying for a cost for sheltering also. So the total cost for animal management in the county, let's say, is very significant.
It's
No,
actually
the
capped.
375 includes a portion of that amount in the budget for next year, includes the amount for sheltering as well.
Okay, very
It's all
Sheltering at the Humane Society.
Sheltering at the Humane Society, yes,
included. Okay, gotcha.
as well as personnel.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that clarification. And thirdly, this morning's news says that the sheriff's department is looking at hiring or bringing in 7 new people. So that, I presume, is included in the 2024 budget, looking ahead.
There are
it-
two individuals for animal control. And then there was 1 new detective position approved for
Anything over that
2024.
would be replacements, to my knowledge, people leaving and they're replacing.
Yeah.
And yes, all that lump was figured in the 24 budget.
Right, so
And
some of that 375,000 is going for sheriff's department animal control, along with the sheriff's department budget for including 7 new people they're looking for.
no,
They're not looking for 7 new people.
Hmm?
They're not looking for 7. We did not approve 7 additional deputies. So they're trying to fill vacancies. They're having a hard time. It takes a long time to fill
Okay, 7,
vacancies.
not 7 new, 7
We
replacements.
approved 1 more deputy.
Gotcha.
Okay, so
One
yeah, the figures are a
detective.
little bit the eye of the beholder, I guess.
Right. Okay, good clarification. Thank you.
also, this is at the table now is the 2023 budget amendment. The 2024 come back next week.
We will have a public hearing for 2024 budget next Tuesday, the
next Tuesday.
19th. So I'll be back.
Any other public comment on this topic?
I think it's kind of unfortunate how quickly the Humane Society jumped out of it, and now temporarily anyway, we're going to have normal police officers who are already short. We're already short of actually chasing dogs. So I hope that we somehow figure out how, even though the law enforcement is supposed to be in charge of that, we end up with not trained police or whatever chasing dogs, but somebody at a more appropriate level.
Yeah. I think they were able to hire the officers that were doing it for Humane Society.
Right.
And
They're approved for 2 new positions that are dedicated to animal control.
and in addition to that, I believe City of Longview is hiring one, and I think another city. So there might actually be an increase in animal control officers for the county when it's all said and done.
But they're not, they may work for the sheriff's department, but they're not sheriff's deputies. They're animal control officers, different.
They're animal
different
control
category.
officers. Mhm.
Yeah, so the sheriff has emergency management as a subdivision, as well as animal control, and also law enforcement records,
Yes.
which so it's not just the deputies, but it's got quite a few important responsibilities.
Okay. Any other public comment on this? Seeing none and no hands, we'll close the public comment part.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the budget amendment as presented this morning.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Scanning for one last time. I see no hands. Okay. We'll call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Thank you, Kathy. We have, if there's public comment, we'll take some if you have.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Quite a number of years ago, I wrote a report on love overwhelming. And I'm sure that Dennis and Arn remember that. And now I'm here again to discuss the same subject from a different light. I'm the PCO again for Crawford. And I'm noticing personally an uptick of crime in my precinct. And I've been talking to the PCOs adjacent to my precinct about the same issues. And I'm here to discuss what I think is a potential solution to part of the problem that Kelso and specifically Longview have been experiencing as an outgrowth of the homeless problem we've got in the area here. One of the issues is that a lot of the violations against ordinances, code, government laws is the issue of how to process people who have bad habits, who have violated not only county and city law, but state law. And if you or I did these things, we'd get a visit by whichever agency was appropriate where we live. But a lot of the things start as a nuisance problem and then seem to escalate into theft and confrontation. So what I've witnessed in the last 20 years I've lived here is that there was an irregularity between Kelso, Longview, and county ordinances. And what I've witnessed also is that when something is needed for a particular what's the word I want? Action by, in this case, I'll say homeless people, it's hard to get consistent enforcement between the two cities and the county. I'll quote a county planning employee who's no longer with the county. What these people do is they find out what the laws and ordinances are. And I'm speaking now of the campers, not the residents of Camp Hope. And they jump between precincts and county places. They move. Once they get a violation, then they move to the next one until they run out of resources or time or support, then they move on out of the county. So I'm not talking about the mom that's down in the Camp Hope or the old lady that lost her house. I'm talking about predators. And I think a lot of the responsibility to figure out how to stop the catch and release or frequent flyers, whatever you want to call it, of these people is to set up tough ordinances in the county that the cities can reference in all their documentation. And I think that the prosecutor needs to be the head of this solution. And I don't know whether there can be a blue ribbon committee of police chiefs and the sheriff and the prosecutor, but it also has to include the court system. Because if you or I did these violations, if we defecated on the street in Kelso, if we trashed a bunch of areas in Longview, we would get a fine. Well, obviously, these people all feign that they don't have any money. So some way there has to be I'll call it a punishment for inappropriate activity that follows through from the prosecution to the court to the jail and then release. And the only way I see that this becomes a inhibitor for people to come here for all the free stuff is that they have to serve public service some way. But it does have to be managed. And there is a dollar value in that. But we're losing tax dollars by people moving away because they feel that there isn't a punishment for these people that, I'll just say, trashes the community. In the last year, I've been robbed. I've had people violate the no trespassing signs. I've had people defecating on the lower lot of our property. And I've had little incidences in the past 20 years, but nothing like this. And so there are other communities who are not having this problem. And then I don't know what the reason was for, but there was a stabbing just the other day down here. And it seems like violent crime is picking up. So I don't know who all the perpetrators are. Most of the police departments track these people. But I was even pickpocketed in Winco week before last by a pro. And so now I've got an open case in Longview. I've got an open case in Kelso, and I'm sure I'm not unique. So some way these violations have to be categorized and code has to be written to address them. I don't have all the answers of what the final decisions are, but it has to include the court so that we don't overburden the court. But they have to understand there's penalties for what they're doing. And we have to have a coordinated, I'll call it a fusion center of information so that the police chiefs and the sheriff are all seeing the same information. I know that once they file a complaint somebody does, it's usually either used to be the nuisance abatement officer came out, and now he's told me that I just need to call the police every time. Well, they have to have a code that's common to do something about the person whoever is doing the violation of. So there's code for causing debris and garbage in the freeways and the streets and everything else. There's code about public health requirements. This involves Department of Human Services and the law enforcement. And I've sat on committees, a committee here that was addressing it, and it was oriented towards the service organizations that help these people. I'm not talking about the mentally insane person who has violated something. I'm talking about people who just don't have any respect for the community. And so I'd like to see some concerted effort from the Board of Commissioners to task the prosecutor's office to try to come up with some suggestions of things that they believe will be effective to abate this problem we've got going on. And it just keeps going on. I think I look back, it was like 2016 when I addressed this the last time. It's not a center that is housing people who don't have a home. It's the attraction of all those people that are rejected. We need code to discourage them from coming here. And they always cite the Constitution and privacy. Well, if they're caught doing something, then they should be registered in whatever legal manner it is. And when they're caught doing it over and over again, then the court ought to find some way in discouraging them from coming here. But I know for a fact that there's counties shipping people here. And I know for a fact from working with the Human and Health Services and law enforcement, that we are the recipient of Seattle and Portland offload, and it's going to get worse. I'm a citizen of Wallowa County also. They want to set up a commune over there for people out of Portland and the illegals that are farm workers. So it's not just here, but it's coming. So I don't know what the total solution is. I'm willing to sit on a committee with citizens and law enforcement and the judiciary branch to try to solve this problem of not being able to control the environment we live in. But I feel like I'm living in a third world country. I've been to South America. I've been to Europe. And it's the same type of people, the same organized crime thing. I don't know whether you're aware of it, but in Portland, they have a king and queen. They have their own little government. And they use that as an information avenue to people who go from place to place. So there's the out of luck person, there's the hobo, and then there's the criminal. And in dispersed with the is the mentally ill person. We have no facilities in Cowlitz County to act as a Western state institution or anything like that. And we only get so many beds with the state. So some way there has to be a filtering system which identifies the predators from the rest of them. And I'm asking you to make it good to go for the prosecutor and the courts to go hard on the predators, not the rest of them. Even Love Overwhelming, who the director, I guess, is the state interface here, they do background check. Once the person flunks the background check, they have put transportation out of the county away from here. We have to have the same sort of a system. I hate to say, push it to Clark County, but a lot of the trouble is originating there also. So anyway, I still feel that the prosecutor, if they're confident they've got a county code for whatever the violations are, then they're going to get more response out of the system and the judicial system than just generally going and arresting this person and dumping him in the jail. And there's got to be cities that have code that's successful, or else they would have the same problem we do.
Al, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that we all understand that this whole homeless situation is probably the #1 issue in the county. I think everybody's aware that we had a big change in the city council at Longview, and that was driven by the homeless policy, or a big part of that was driven by the lack of the city of Longview to deal with, in fact, even create a bigger problem for the rest of the county. So I think all three of you gentlemen have a copy of the Tragedy of American Commons, or American Compassion. Al could have quoted right out of that entire book. That's a big part of what he's talking about. And our organization will be working behind the scenes or in front of the scenes or wherever we need to be working to start implementing some of the things that Al's talking about, and you will find in that book when you take the time to read it.
I totally appreciate what this gentleman shared because it is an issue. And as I went around visiting, going door to door, it's a concern for a lot of people. The solutions are not easy. They're not at all, but there are solutions that are better than maybe what we're doing. We need to seek those out because there are communities. I don't know all the details, but I called Marysville, north of Seattle, a community that seems to have it handled. And I called and talked to several people up there in the city capacity. Now that's not county, but it is the city itself. You know, what do you do? Well, we have ordinances and we enforce them. Therein is some of the challenge, I guess, if you will, because I think we have a lot of ordinances. It isn't necessarily we need more, but we need to correlate and work better together. I think there's an opportunity again to better understand where that help is for those people who find themselves homeless. But we've got to also understand that it's okay that there be consequences to choices that people make. You don't, in a free country, you can't just do whatever you want to do because it is about what's best for the people that live here. You know, government was established again to organize some of that protection for people and make that available to them. I think there's a good solution here to maybe look at a committee that brings together from the two cities, county representation, law enforcement, and the judicial, the court system, and figure out if we can't say, this one is enough over the line, here's the consequence to that, and we're gonna enforce that and see what happens with that. Or look outside of our area and see areas that are maybe doing a better job, because it's not gonna get better on its own. You know, it's driven so much by I think drugs are a real issue, you know, and they become so available here. We have a pretty poor reputation with respect to that. That may be an area we could zero in on that would start by limiting or making it harder for people, or to a less enticing, I guess, if you will. I don't know. Maybe all these people like the rain and like to be out in the, I'm not sure. I don't know the solutions, and I'm not saying you three or the county commissioners are responsible, but I think it's an opportunity for leadership to be given. You know, that maybe you could help lead some effort to say, let's address this in some way and put together some kind of a plan that says, here's how we're gonna go about trying to address that. And it may not be perfect, it can be adjusted, but at least it's something that someone could point to and said, look, here's this county, Cowlitz County, this is what they're doing to try to address that. It may not be perfect, but it would be helpful. And I appreciate comments like this and a focus on that, because there's people hurting and there's people being taken. Well, they've been here for a long time and they've seen the community change. And I think we can help them maybe get that back through some efforts.
So, as usual, I'm not sure how to begin, but I think the solution to the problem is not quite that hard. It's hard to understand. It's hard to have the courage to go through with the solution, but we behave in government primarily like funds are at our disposal to do anything we would like. Few of us spend our own dollars doing the kind of things to support the homeless, but we mandate that the taxpayers support the homeless. We use public money wantonly. We do so because in our nature, most of us are compassionate. But real compassion comes when you reach into your own pocket, not the public. Not the public. Our own pocket is pretty limited. The public is unlimited. You all sit in fear that next week there'll be a new tax we impose upon you. And typically, we can do that. Now, we don't do it outright. We do it in different ways. We talked earlier about sales tax coming in. Well, I've been trying to figure out how the debt on the credit card ties in with the fact that our revenues, regardless of the situation, seem to go up or have gone up during the COVID era. And at some point, I'm just saying that you will, as Margaret Thatcher said, trouble with socialism, and soon you run out of other people's money. Well, let me then say, we've come upon a nation that has confounded itself with laws. It's not sufficient for us to understand the morality of thievery. We have to say, no, you can't steal on Tuesdays because the law says you can't. But Wednesdays, we didn't say anything, so maybe it's okay to steal on Wednesday. We have tons of laws. These are violated all the time. We don't need another coalition of laws being exactly the same. It would be useful if there was some consistency, but it's not the problem. So as long as we think that we can tax other people, and that's not just the electeds, that's you guys think it's okay to support a program from the government coffers to take care of people. There are people, as was mentioned, that most of us would be happy to help, but therein the unintended consequences of the law to help them is what we're experiencing now. I made a parable about the hot dog stand last week, and I had let me see if I check my notes. Someone said people are moving out and we're losing tax dollars. I'll just want to say personally for myself, if I ever make a decision on how much taxes I can take out of you, shoot me, because that's completely against my principles. I don't decide things on, can I tax you more, or am I going to lose your taxes by doing the correct thing? Bottom line is, let's do the right thing. In terms of fusion, it was mentioned, the law enforcement people, I think in many ways are very frustrated. They all know, they all talk to each other. They all know who the problem people are. Maybe out of 100 problem people, they might be confused on 2 or 3, but overall, so it isn't that issue. It's actually the intertwining of things. Was mentioned that we should task the PA's office with. We can't task the PA office with anything. We'd be glad to talk to the PA, but we can't ask them to do anything and expect them to comply. Actually, a thing was mentioned that people are shipped here. I would surely like to see something concrete, evidence to that. I'm not saying it's not true. I suspect a little more strongly to suspect it's true, but having documentation on that would actually be helpful. And lastly, not lastly, just The Tragedy of American Compassion, excellent book. It documents it all in a very matter-of-fact, clear set of history of the United States, actually. It's excellent. So, and then there's the always reference to drugs, as if on the one hand, most of us feel that our Second Amendment is important, and the other side refers to it, well, guns cause harm. Drugs really don't per se cause harm. It's the people using them that cause the harm. Same way, like in high school, we used to think it was excusable to say, oh, I didn't know what I was doing, I was drunk. Really? Is that excusable? And we allow that, and it gets used against us time and time again. There is no excuse for doing damage to another person or another piece of property, period, in my book. I'll stop here.
Just to supplement the discussion, the lineup of our safety in our county, of course, goes through the law enforcement, the prosecuting attorney, and the judicial system that then follows up on the cases. So I certainly hear the concern that our law enforcement officials out on the street and road, every time they make a stop for some reason, they have a report to make, et cetera. But if the prosecuting attorney has not given an idea of what laws or what things he wants to enforce representing the priority for our safety in our community, then if people on the street know that they're wasting a lot of their time. Similarly, if the prosecuting attorney has his priorities, but the judicial system is not going to support it with follow-up and good cases and holding people accountable, then the other two groups are wasting their time. So I'm saying is that we with your help, but also as a citizen of this county, the prosecuting attorney is really in the center of this for saying what our priorities for protecting us, what elements are with our resources we can apply to, but he also needs to work with the judges, the judicial system, to know what they are going to follow up on. Drug court has come up, other forms. So you are the pocketbook anyway. We are the citizens, and we need your help, but you need our help to yell loudly. And I think starting with a discussion of those three entities. And again, on people coming into the county, I've asked the sheriff several times in the past, hey, what do we know about people coming in? He claims ignorance every time. So that's not really representing the people of the county.
Martin, you had said something about some proof on the people that are being shipped in here. I don't know if you recall, but Bill Youngren got the records of all the people, the 111 people, I think it was, that were originally interviewed for Camp Alabama version 2. And I think his findings were something in the neighborhood of 30% of those people had absolutely no ties to Cowlitz County. Now, that's not a direct, somebody shipped them here, but that'll give you some kind of an indication of what kind of numbers there are. I think I'm a very optimistic guy, and I think just the fact that we're sitting here talking now and the fact that what happened over in Longview, I think that there's now enough public pressure that we're going to start throwing away all of the past positions and all the crap that we've allowed to happen to get us here, that we can all start working together. That includes with the new city council, you guys, the prosecuting attorney, the courts, getting the juvie center opened up so we got a way to humanely and properly take care of people with mental problems. there is all kinds of opportunity. And I think the timing in my experience, timing is about 90% of everything. And a year ago, we could talk ourselves blue in the face, but I think we're at the point now where there should be enough common ground that we can all start pulling together and get some of these things solved. If you go back to the book that we're talking about, none of this is that hard. It's all very simple. Al hit on the first part of it, which is getting people in whatever groups they're in, because the groups are different unless you have somebody who has multiple problems. And of course, that's something different. But once you start figuring out which group people belong in, and you have a proper professional intake process, not an intake process run by people who have skin in the game, but somebody's totally separate, well-trained, and not tied to any group, then we'll start to get a proper classification of these people. You can't go ask the people, any of these people, which they did for Camp Alabama version 2, gee, how many of you how many of you are ready for help? And oh, by the way, you get a free house. You know, all of them said that they are all ready for the free house, but that's not a proper intake process. So until that's the first step, and then with all of us working together, it's not going to take very long to figure out how to handle all these different people. And everybody I talk to is telling me that we will reduce the homeless in Cowlitz County by over 50% once we start treating people according to their proper classification and enforcing the ordinances we have. So this is getting simpler and simpler by the day. And like I think it was Arn said, it comes down to courage. So do we have the courage to do what's right?
I'd like to add one thing, the mention of drugs. When I first came into office, the first week or two, call it a month, I went to an HHS meeting where I was to meet the entire staff. And when I exited the meeting, I stopped by the front desk there and did my usual inquiry. If I'm a citizen and I want help, do I come in through those doors and come here and I talk to you? Yeah. And so I chatted with the lady for a bit, and then it turns out that we got into the discussion where she said, you know, my daughter is a heroin addict and she lives under the bridge. In those days, it was under the bridge, which is just over that away, I guess. And she said she can come home anytime she wants. She doesn't desire to come home. She says she's free. When we interviewed a person here from Camp Alabama, I finally asked what I thought was the most important question. I said, what is it that you get out of Camp Alabama that is the most important to you? Without hesitation, the answer was freedom, because you're paying the bills. I'll stop.
It was mentioned that you've authorized another deputy sheriff. Is that what I understand?
A detective.
Another staffer. I've been talking with the police over my own issues in Kelso and Longview. And I noted that most of these young men are coming from Portland because we're close, because we're advertising. And they want to flee from Portland. The problem is that if they find out it's as one state patrolman told me, a catch and release county, then they're going to move on, even if you attract them. So it's all related. If the officers don't feel like they're supported, then they're not going to stay. And again, it goes back to once they make an arrest, once they identified a person that has done whatever the crime is, how is that person going to be handled? When I went through the Citizens Police Academy, we went through the jail. We talked to the prosecutor's office. We talked to the judges. I don't know what the policy is right now, but to keep the jail operating with funds, they were housing people from Tacoma to make their budget ends meet. Where you are involved is you are the purse strings, even though you don't control all of the source of the fund. And so, like the House and the US government, Congress, you have certain controls. I don't know how much you have over some of these publicly elected officials, but you do have power over resources. And I guess they need to get the message, these elected officials, partisan or not, that the community is tired of what's going on. And again, it's got to be consistent between the people who enforce the law, not create new ones, but and those who give judicial decisions on the law. And I've found when I dealt with Love Overwhelming that I asked for a code in Cowlitz. They said, oh, you can't do that. But in California, there was this court case and the city lost, and you can't write a code like that. And then I went and researched it and found out that they settled out of court. There was no opinion. And they're saying there's an opinion and that applies to the Constitution, and that was a lie. But it sounded good, and it got rid of me. We can't keep doing this. We have to support our officers and ourselves to make this a decent community that has law and order. And when you tie their hands by some court case with a fallacious, not with no due diligence of what happened, they leave. And I can't blame them because they're putting their life on the line, especially with this idiot with the knife or the shooting the other day. And when they know they're not being supported, it's because we don't, communicate well enough that they are supported, at least in our mind, but we haven't voiced it. But again, you hold the purse strings. You can authorize 6 new officers to Brad, but if they can't get their job done and they keep doing it the same thing over and over again, they're not going to come and they're not going to stay. So thank you for authorizing the extra officer.
I really don't disagree with a lot of the conversation. And last night something popped in my head and I got in the office this morning, and so I just did a quick scan and look, and I didn't know why this popped in my head, and I wanted to look it up. But after this conversation, I think I understand a little more. I looked up 3 different, just briefly looked up 3 different. I looked at 3 different studies, and it's a study based on, you can call it deaths of despair and deaths of despair, suicides, drug overdose, alcohol. A lot of the crime and stuff, you hear stats all the time, 70-80% of crime is by people on drug abuse and stuff like that. And these studies said, and I'm going to tell you one of the solutions, and it doesn't cost. There's things we can do as entities, as government entities, and I don't disagree with some of those, but there's a free thing out there. It doesn't cost the taxpayers anything. And these studies have shown it improves and helps people. And we've gotten away from it. And I think that's one of the reasons we are where we are today. Study by Harvard, T.H. Chan, School of Public Health, May 6, 2020. Over 66,000 women, over 43,000 men. 68% lower risk for women, 33 lower risk for men. This is deaths of despair, suicide, overdose, alcohol. Florida State University, May 18th, 2018. Didn't give me data that said significantly lower risk of these things. Institute for Family Studies, September 16th, 2019. This was a study on teens, 5 times less likely to binge on alcohol, 8 times less likely to use marijuana. You don't want to know what the solution is? Church. Participation in church. So when you talk about groups where they need to go to, maybe we should sit in these kids, have them sit in a pew once a week instead of all the other nonsense we put them through. And like I said, I don't even know why this popped in my head last night, but I looked it up and then I hear the conversation today, and you never hear this talked about. We can correct a lot of problems without spending a dime, just by getting back to the ideals and the principles of the book. Anybody else?
Yeah, if you, excuse me, you go back to the book that we're talking about, I'm talking about the comments, the one I mentioned before, or if you look at Alcoholics Anonymous and learn about them, everything comes back to some spiritual belief, something bigger than yourself, and also a friend to help you with that. So you're right. This is a real simple thing. We got to get over, gee, I believe in this belief, or I believe in that belief, or I go to this church, I go to that church. I don't think there's anything I've read that says any one or the other is specifically correct. It's the fact that people can latch on to something bigger than themselves, something to believe in, and then somebody helper to help them along with making that transition. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. And again, we go back to that book I was talking about, and that's one of the basic principles you see all the way through that book. All the successful programs for the last 350 years. I mean, and it's well documented. So this isn't just some crazy individual on this side of the spectrum or that side. This is a total study of history over the last 350 years, what works and what doesn't work. And it should be obvious that what we're doing now isn't working. So we need to be open-minded.
Anybody else?
I think what you guys are talking about also, that's how Alcoholic Anonymous does it. Think, something bigger than yourself. And I think we're on the right track if we could be unanimous and realize that this could work. So why not give it a try?
Anybody else? Okay, I see no hands.
Do we have a young person in the audience who would like to help us? Apparently. I'm good.
Okay.
Oh, I do have a miscellaneous if you're up for it.
Yep.
You had a meeting yesterday that, is that something you can talk about?
I'd like to digest that a little bit and kind of
Okay,
figure it out, and then I certainly will.
okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, we will adjourn. Thank you.